Hello and welcome back to the Apprentice One-to-One podcast. We are joined in full trim tonight. We've got Craig and Richard with us, and Richard has got an interesting background behind him, so we'll go to Richard in a minute. But how are you doing, Craig?
I'm good. I'm obviously a bit busier than Richard because he's been with his crayons all day doing this. But yeah, apart from that, I'm good. Life's busy and nice, and don't know about you, but I think last time we spoke was pre-Christmas, and it certainly feels like it's still pre-Christmas because that break is well gone. That's for sure.
It goes so fast, doesn't it? It always feels like, yeah, we're going to have a nice 2-week break or whatever, but it ends up being more like 7 or 8 days at most. And before you know it, you're back to it.
It's the one time construction shuts down, I would say, so you actually get to switch off and have a break. But yeah, when you come back, you basically just delayed the onslaught of what you're coming back to, haven't you? So it's all part of the fun. But no, good. Glad to be back. Busy, happy. Yeah, about it really.
Nice stuff. And yourself, Richard?
Very well, thanks. Lovely to see you both. Happy New Year to you both. Yeah, all good. I was a bit gutted. I missed out on the Christmas bonanza, but I did listen to it on my way into London today on the train. But there's a couple of interesting bits and pieces that you spoke about there in regards to correction factors on varying different installation methods. So I thought that was quite interesting. A lot of stuff around some of the questions that came in I thought were really good. The AM2 one was quite good. When can I take it? When should I take it? But as always, Craig was spot on with everything he said. I thought that was really good. Yeah, I was at the in-laws over in Wales, where you have to go and get your standard buffet and, you know, all that type of stuff. But yeah, got it. But again, because we were kind of so busy, all of us, certainly towards the end of last year, kind of run out of time, didn't we? We had so many good plans to launch into earthing and bonding and various other bits and pieces. It just, I don't know where the year went in the end, to be honest. It kind of just went. And then I was busy with the charity because Dave had got the last week off. So it was just me and Luke on Monday and Tuesday. And there was, you know, lots of stuff to try and get over the line, which we managed to do. And then it was nice, yeah, to have them few days off and catch up with Indiana Jones for the 19th time and, you know, all that. But yeah, all good, mate. And how are you? More to the point, Mr. ECN top man of the year that, you know, has got like about 15 clones of himself, you know. But great night, to be fair. And what an event that was. It was great the year before, but last year with the magicians and all that, and went the way Bent, he came over to our table, and I've got it here. He got a fork. I don't know if you can see that. And in his hand, and it is solid steel. It's solid steel, that is. And I don't know how he done it. I can't explain it, but the actual arm of it is twisted. And he rubbed his hand on it, and he went like that. And I'd had a couple of drinks, don't get me wrong, but I was like, I don't know. I just don't know how that happened, and I've kept it because it's just like, it's incredible. And yeah.
Rumor has it he relied on your sleight of eye rather than his sleight of hand.
Yeah, like he had another one in his pocket. I was watching him like a hawk because I thought, he ain't going to have me. Do you know what I mean? But I couldn't explain that. And the lads from TIS were there and watching as well. We were all kind of there. And I don't know. I just went to the bar and got another drink. I thought, well, that's it. Can't explain it. So we just move on. But what an event that was. And E17, they killed it, didn't they? Absolutely rocked it. So, you know, Carly and
Kelly.
Yeah, that's it, Kelly. Fantastic, you know, fair play. But it was really good to get involved, and it was top secret, obviously, with yourself. And I'd recorded a little video along with Craig and Steve Humphreys from Napit, but they obviously didn't get time to put them all. But it was lovely to hear really good things from Gaz and Craig and whatever. And it was just lovely to see your face, you know, and well deserved, mate. You know, brilliant, really, really good.
I had no idea. I can't believe you lot can keep secrets that good, because everyone bitches and talks in this industry and nobody's lips leaked. So that was the most surprising part of all that. But yeah, the night itself was really good. The magician, he did that calculation, didn't he, where he went through, and he ended up with, was it a date or something? I was like,
the date of the event and the time it was on the clock at the time, wasn't it? So
yeah, how do you do that? It's like smarter people than us magicians, that's for sure. But no, it was really good night outside. I decided my very nice award, and it was nice to see everyone. There's a lot of people who you speak to on social media who were there, and a lot of people of industry as well. It was just a nice thing, and the team at ECN have put a really good event on there. It's one of the better ones that I've ever been to, and I didn't have to go on a slow boat. I see you've got the slow boat on your picture behind you there. You couldn't resist that one.
Yeah, there's a pint of beer there somewhere.
Oh yeah,
your arm's missing because I've had to erase myself and my other half out of the photo, which she saw me doing when I got off the train. What are you doing? I said, "Oh, don't ask." But yeah, but I don't know. I need to change the aspect ratio of it because I've just done it real quick on Canva, but it needs to be 16:9. But there you go. But yeah, I thought I'd do something quick.
Yeah, I don't think we've actually mentioned, though, have we, that Apprentice 1-to-1 came runner-up in the event, which was nice as well. So
yeah, well, this year we'll get it this year.
Yeah. That's it. We'll win it. We'll win it this year. Yeah. I had the pleasure of going up to Riverside College today, so I've been off doing another one of our drops. You did the one at Waltham Forest, Craig, with my guys the other week, and a lot of me pushing solar installs through December led to me not getting out as much as I wanted, basically, which was a good move because we're buried in snow everywhere at the minute. So I'm running through these last ones. I'm going to St Helens and Burnley next week, and then down to Andover and Milton Keynes the following week. So they will all be out and delivered. Solax are still to send some stuff that should arrive tomorrow, and Calidus Wholesale, I've just had the list from them, sending about 40 solar panels and some more inverters. So we need to get some of that to Waltham Forest because the Ken and the team there need the panels delivering. So we're still going to go back and maybe help them with installing their inverter and battery as well. So that was really nice. It was great to meet little Chris again. He was talking about you two, actually. I think you're there soon, are you, Richard? You're going off to do something at the...
Yeah, I think me and our good friend Mr. Cranis from ECO, me and Dave and Darren went up last year, stayed overnight, went with a car with 4 wheels. Unfortunately, the wheels went missing off it because that's the kind of, But no, fantastic. I went the night before with Darren and we had a chat with some of the adult learners that were in level 2, level 3s. It was really good. And then the next day we did some presentations to the full-timers. But no, it was nice to give a bit back. And it's, I forget how difficult it is trying to get some out of some of them. You know what I mean? They just sit there and you're trying to engage with them and ask them why they want to be electricians and where they see themselves and who they're working for, what type of work. We went into the workshop after lunch. They were fabricating some trunking bends, but then the fire alarm went off. So, and there was an actual fire in the catering section of the college, so we didn't manage to get back in and carry on and do a bit. But we've promised to go back and do some more. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. It's really encouraging to see that college actually, because Chris was showing me a £20 million investment they've got to build a renewables specific centre. And they've actually got like a building that's all about hydrogen. We're saying they had this building put together where they can do hydrogen distribution, hydrogen boilers. And then it all came out in the news that everyone had gone off hydrogen boilers when they'd finished building it. So he's like, we try and adapt and meet the challenges and things that industry wants. And then it changes. And that's where the difficulties in training become apparent, because we're all moaning about, there's not enough renewables, there's not enough this, there's not enough that. But it does change so quick. And training establishments don't have a lot of money to keep shifting around and changing what they're delivering. But anyway, it's nice to see that they've got a cutting state-of-the-art building going up, 20 million quid focused just at renewables. So yeah, it shows what can be done, even in difficult and trying times.
And what becomes hard, because people will say that's because of that college, and Chris and the team down there are fantastic. Let's not take nothing away from it. But to get a bid like that, for a college, you're talking about 2 years worth of red tape and policies and ticking all the boxes and starting at every college in the country and eventually whittling it down to the point where like 1 or 2 out of all the colleges in the country will get that grant to do something amazing like that. And it is amazing, but that needs to be much more widespread, doesn't it? Let's be honest, because with the best will in the world, Chris and his team can't teach every single electrical apprentice this country needs for the next however many years. It's all kudos to them. I love Chris to bits, but yeah, it needs to be a wider, rolled out scheme for it to have the impact it needs to have, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, they've got their Ofsted reports outstanding. The lecturers are there for the long term. I don't think they have a great staff turnover there, which is kind of the key ingredient, I think, in a lot of these training spaces. You guys will know better than anyone. You've been in those environments, and staff turnover is a big problem because of salaries that are available, and just the nature of the beast, people coming to industry, going back to teaching and such. It's not easy when you're trying to organise that, especially when your budgets are divided up around different departments beyond where maybe the funding was intended. We spoke about this loads on the podcast, but it's just really nice to see they've got some great facilities there. The lecturers and assessors are fantastic. One of the assessors was telling me actually that a student had just done their AM2. I think it was the day before, or maybe even today, or they'd had the results today, and they'd failed and been given like a £900 bill resit for like 4 sections they'd got wrong, and I was stunned it cost that much.
But, it's crazy money, but that's, again, listening to the last podcast you did before Christmas on the train, and you were talking about, prepping learners for AM2 and the fact that they have to sign a form, their employer, the training provider. Clearly, if they failed all 4 sections, they clearly weren't ready for it, and that is such a shame, because it's going to cost £900, and it's not that as well. It's the effect it has on you when you go and retake those sections. It's not one section. It's tough. It's incredible the mental effect it will have.
It's not just that in this day and world of bravado, right? Typical male-dominated industry. You're going back to work. Everybody knows where you've been.
Yeah. How'd you get on?
Yeah.
As much as you say, I was just off for a couple of days. No, you weren't, mate. It's 4 years. It's the day you joined us. It's known like, oh, you're going to college 3 days this week. That's convenient. Oh, guess where you're going? The AM2 Centre. Like the pressure that all of that adds and builds into the situation as well.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I was doing my design course and stuff last year, the reason I made sure I passed was there was no way I was going back to work to hear how other people in my company had passed and I hadn't. But
no, I mean, well, just
that was the biggest bit of pressure, to be honest.
Yeah, we were just speaking, obviously, before we started the podcast, that me and Dave done the EAL version of it last year as well, which I thoroughly enjoyed, to be fair. I did see certificate way back when, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. But Dave was printing off the OEM manual that you have to put with all the other questions and stuff, and he's gone over the top because he doesn't want it to come back, if that makes sense. So, he's gone beyond explaining the reasons as for what, when, how, etc., and added that much in. Do you know what I mean? Similar to myself, I haven't quite finished mine yet, but because you don't want it to come back, you want to make sure that you've absolutely smashed it. And with the written exam for EAL, you've obviously got the paper that they provide you with, but I think I had about 12 additional A4 sheets that I had to attach because there weren't enough space. But I probably waffled on far too much or went down a path I shouldn't have gone down. And I literally had a couple of minutes left of the exam, whereas Dave done his an hour before me. Bang, he's done, he's gone. But it is tough. But yeah, I enjoyed it, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, they're not giving the game around this particular student. I don't think there was anything really catastrophic in their AM2. I think it was more to do with the way they'd filled the test form in and a little bit of something around the conduit and whatnot. There's nothing massive, but resulted in that big expense. And they were keen to get finished for the pay rise that comes with it. These people have been in training, they want to get qualified, they know they can do the job, but sometimes like not ensuring that you're thoroughly prepared and you understand the layout of the test sheets that NET and AM2 use might not be the same as the ones you're familiar with at work. And getting your head around all of that are the tips that you'll find on the NET website to prepare properly. And it is sometimes down to that level. Like you've got to look at the actual materials that they want you to work with might not be the same as what you're used to. The test set could be different. Yeah. The test sheets are laid out different. They're not on software, they are on paper. And make sure you're ready for all of those.
And it's little things, isn't it? So it's like, when's the last time any of us in our day job manually checked a ZS on a test certificate? Because how long has software been putting it into, you check it when you go, oh, that one's a little bit close. And we might, if we've got time, we'll come on, because it's just made me think of an interesting question as to what ZS you should put down, because if it's an EICR, should it be the regs one or should it be a guidance note one? Where do you go? But maybe we'll do that. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's the AM2, sorry.
Yeah, go on, Craig.
The AM2 effectively is a driving license. And I don't know about you guys, but when I had my driving license, I definitely read that highway code more than once.
Yeah. What's the highway code? And then you've got the additional pressure of somebody watching you.
Yeah.
As well. You know what I mean? And the time's ticking. and then you've got the other people around you that might be undertaking it, and they might be a little bit quicker than you, or they've approached it in a different way. You know what I mean? The pressure is incredible. You know.
Yeah, it was the costs on it that surprised me, because obviously you have to pay for that resit. You know, you get a free hit as part of your apprenticeship, but after that you're paying again, and you know, £900 when you've got to just take care of some little bits that you've maybe not given the attention you should have done at the outset. And there's a lesson there to other people coming along afterwards. Make sure you kind of do put that research in. And it's what I really want to know is who did better on their design exam out of Richard and Dave. That's what I want to know is who won.
So with EL, do you get the actual score or do you just get the grade? Because with City and Guild, you just get a grade. You don't find out your actual score.
Well, we both got distinctions, but I asked for my percentage, which
I love that. I love that you wanted to know.
Well, to be fair, the lecturer, he obviously knows that who me and Dave work for, and all day long I thought, well, Dave's going to do me on it, because it's like Craig really. He is a designer, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So I've got a fairly decent working knowledge of the book, etc., whatever. But I thought he's going to do me. And don't forget, talking about pressures, he walked out an hour before I did. Do you know what I mean? I thought, bloody hell, okay, that's fair enough. But I ain't going to say anything, because that's a big lad, and I wouldn't want to.
I think your face tells the story, to be honest. You don't have to say anything.
But it is ironic that Richard got 100% and Dave got 99.9, but only Richard got given the percentages, isn't it?
we didn't get 100%.
No, it's that competition that is always there. That I have that with Matthew and Nathan, even down to silly, stupid bits of CPD we do with eFix. We still want to win. We still want to win. It's good, healthy competition, I think.
Yeah, sure. And with any exam, there's obviously a marking criteria for that exam. So the difference between 1% and 2% is a couple of marks. And if you've not put exactly what they're looking for, because similar to the City and Guilds one, they'll ask you to describe, explain in your own words, and if it's not got the key points in as per the marking criteria, you might not get all the marks. So it's not to say it's difficult, and that's the whole point of it. It's to demonstrate your working knowledge of it, as opposed to reading something out. And Craig will tell you how difficult it is, but it's at that level, and I'm glad it is. It's a great qual,
because it is a knowledge, but it's not a knowledge as well. Like, I could have gone into my 9/6 exam and I could have got asked about ATEX explosive atmospheres. Yeah. And you're like, well, I don't work in that environment, but you still potentially are going to have to talk about that. And it's like petrol stations, anything that's kind of like starting to get, I know they're not fully covered, but anything that starts to be covered in the regs, you can be put into that situation. And, we could all answer a relatively simple question now, like explain what an RCD does. But each one of us might explain it slightly different. And that's the problem when it comes to the design exam, because the examiner, I've seen a couple of the City and Guild marking schemes, for example, and they've got sort of like, it might say, okay, well, explain an RCD, but their answer grid might just be 2 or 3 question bullet points to say, have they spoke about shock? Have they spoke about difference in leakage or whatever? And have 2 or 3 points, and all the rest of the waffle doesn't matter what you put. It's did you hit those 3 points to get those 3 marks? And that's what becomes hard, is your explanation might be fantastic, but you might have missed 2 of those points.
Exactly.
Didn't mean you didn't know what you were doing.
A couple of percent,
No.
Right. But
you've got to understand the marking system, haven't you, and make sure you play that game in and amongst all of your knowledge, for sure. So
and if you have to, and I got buried in that, I just waffled on. There's quite a bit on harmonics, and you had to calculate the third harmonic based on an example question, and there was bits on external influences on a farm, in a barn. What would you need to consider? And you start waffling, you get an appendix 5, and you go back into 52, and But it was really good. I was confident that I put plenty down, and there's always a couple of cable calcs very similar to the 9/6, and as long as you lay out correctly, reference as we've done on the podcast, looking at tables, correct column numbers, and all that type of stuff, lay out. So when it gets marked, it can, you can see. And you might have picked something wrong out of the table, but you've got the right process. You'll get some marks, as we've said in previous podcasts. But it was good,
And for people thinking about it, if you're looking at colleges and stuff now, the new level 2 and level 3 qualification, the 8202 or whatever it is, the marking guide with that is the same concept as a marking guide that goes on with the level 4 design course. You know, the way that they mark it and you get your marks there. So it is giving you a good understanding, ready for taking that in the future.
Yeah, that's good that it kind of maps you towards what you need to be doing in those answers. So yeah, you get familiar with it, don't you? But for people who have maybe been in industry for a while, going back to do these kind of courses, you do need to understand what they're looking for in the way you're delivering your answers. I've got a question for you, Richard. And me and Craig covered this on the last podcast around PV Ultra, SWA, and buried DC cables. I don't know if you heard us talking about it. Me and Craig had broadly similar views, but I think we decided different ways of earthing the cable off the top of my head. So how do you look at that?
Well, there's a few things to consider, isn't there? And you know, as you discussed in the previous podcast, that you might not consider, especially when you're running out to, you know, ground-mounted PV panels and all that. When there's a possible damage from rodents and the like, then you've got to consider the mechanical protection for those cables that connect to the panels and all the rest of it. But in terms of it running in the ground without a duct, as you quite rightly said, you've got to think about 522.8.10, which basically says, doesn't it? And it is a shall, that if it's not installed in conduit or a duct, then it shall incorporate an earthed armor or metal sheath or both. So therefore, if you are running an SWA in the ground, regardless of what it's carrying, AC or DC, it must be earthed. So then, are you introducing, as you quite rightly said in the other podcast, different potentials? Probably. At what end? The PV end or the intake end? What effects does that have when you've got AC and DC? I don't know. I'm not that clever in terms of magnetic fields and bits and pieces like that, but it'd be nice to hear. I know Mr. Cranis has got some views, and certainly Michael Peace. I mean, what a legend. You know, knowledge goes beyond mine. So, but yeah, so, you know, are you better than putting it in a duct to the correct standard end, whatever it was? But I seen your little video on that, was interesting. That looks quite robust, that the ducting that you'd got, and and I'd imagine, does that come in 3 meter lengths or so? How rigid is it? Can that be bent round corners, or can you buy bends for it? Or
most of it is in rigid straight lengths, but you can get a flexible variant as well. So you can get a flexible one now.
Okay. And that's got the equivalent impact protection.
I think it's 750 newtons or whatever it is of crushing power. I mean, it can still be pierced. I'm sure it could with someone determined enough. But then you have all your other methods above that, don't you? If someone's digging, you've got your markings, you've got your sand. So that it's more a strike issue, I would say, once it's in there. But I think this cable innovation. Sorry, Richard, go on.
Yeah, so from a shovel or something similar that may penetrate the ground and could potentially damage the cable. So you could use the standard PV Ultra in ducting, but then you mentioned that actually when it comes out of that ducting, then that could be susceptible to rodent damage, etc. So is it better then to run the SWA in a duct, but you don't need to earth the SWA because in effect it's not an extraneous part as such. So then you haven't got that issue.
That's my position with it at the minute, I think. And my view is we need to look beyond just the ground application. You know, even running these up the side of people's buildings, having that armour on there to stop squirrels and rats. We see it where they seem attracted to it. I don't know what is in it that tastes so good, but they rinse these cables and they just sit there working without their insulation on them. So having some sort of protection to stop that seems sensible. But we do need to satisfy the intent of the regs.
And again, that's within the general requirements anyway. It's in 52. You've got to consider all of those external influences and select the correct cable for that purpose. And if there's a chance of rodent damage, then you shouldn't be using standard, PV Ultra.
Pretty much everywhere outdoors, though, isn't it? Any kind. That's our protection method. It's double and reinforced insulation, and if it's outdoors, there is always that risk.
And you've got evidence of that. So
it's managing that. I think this perfectly represents the clashing of AC and DC through this cable innovation. It's got people talking about it. It's got people considering it, but this has been a problem for 15 years maybe, where we've had buried normal steel wire armor cable carrying DC voltages. We've had this issue of rodents damaging things, and everyone's starting to look at this now, is how can we shut PV arrays down at source? Can we use optimizers? Should we be looking more at protecting our installations from pests? Yeah. So hopefully we get some chat from the industry of things, people like yourself and Darren and Michael, all the good people who come to a consensus, as we've discussed before on the podcast. I know you've got such a lot to consider out in the wider industry. We get a bit selfish in the renewables area that we want you talking about and sorting some of this out for us. So it's not easy, but I think there is a discussion to be had at that level.
Yeah, and we provide a platform, an independent platform, to have those conversations. And as we've spoken earlier in the week, that we'd love to invite you into our electrical installation safety forum. That's loads of the members of that forum are from the certification bodies, NAPIT, etc., HSC, and various other organisations, to try and bring these things forward. And the idea of the forum is that will then set a trend for our installation event that will be at the IET every April. So that will bring forward some of those topics that have been brought about, and areas of safety concern that we can all have conversations about, hopefully push forward from that and find solutions to that, whether that's changes in the regulations, legislation, coming up with other ways of making things safer, like optimizers, which we spoke about, that I wasn't familiar, the type of things they could do. Me and Dave had some conversations today about different things, but why not? It's good stuff.
Yeah, I think that the worry is that you end up with a lot of this stuff. My worry with this particular cable type is we're just going to see it buried direct in the ground. We're going to see it buried in the fabric of a building as well. We've got the DC cables, because people see armored cable, we can bury that. It's fine. We do it with AC, and the default is people start to do that, and we end up with kind of the social media of things maybe driving that as acceptable. When really, if we look at what the regs are telling us, it's not in and of itself. So I think we need to be really careful that we get the messaging right as industry. This is just me speaking personally. I don't know if you guys agree. That's how I see it.
But I think what you said there is, with the DC cables, I think it's people recognising this isn't just specifically a reg for DC cables, is it? This is about just cable in general.
Yeah.
And actually that needs to be looked at, because you can bury cable, you can do it. I personally don't understand why you'd not put a duct in the ground if you put a cable, because outside of all the things we spoke about, if you've got to replace that cable, it's a lot easier to pull through a duct than it is to dig the whole thing up again, potentially. So thinking about future proofing, thinking about needing extra supplies, all of those other things, there's so many reasons, in my opinion, why a duct is the right answer. But it is an education piece again, isn't it? And it is looking at that, and these forums are great when people talk in them, and you go to them, and then we go to these events, and I'm looking very much forward to the event in April. It'll be nice to go and attend and listen to what smarter people than me are talking about and hear the changes taking place, and it'll be positive. But we do need more of that, don't we? We need it more publicly being discussed and more out there so that people can form a debate. I think we are, and this is just my opinion, but I think we are moving into a time where almost we lose a little bit of the art of debate, and it's kind of like just do what was told. And actually a debate is some of the best ways to get through. Me and some of the guys in my office debate most days, all days, about types of topic. Well, yeah, that's what the book says, but we need to do this for install. We need to look at this. This is a problem. How do you get there? What can we do? What's our parameters? And you bounce that around and you come somewhere to a happy medium, because the regs are based with the intent and our engineering judgment, and we've got to be careful we don't lose how to apply engineering judgment to situations.
Yeah, and that's what deviations are for. You can deviate from the book, but it can't be any less safe than using the book. But if, as the designer, if you can justify that and prove that it's no less safe because you've done this, this, and this, and this, and whatever else, then that's absolutely fine, isn't it? But you're quite right, and I think that's the strength of Spark, is where we can. Most of us can sit and have sensible conversations about it. Nobody knows everything for sure. And you can see something you didn't quite see, or see it from a different way, or apply this or apply that, and what about this, what about that? And we've done loads of that last year on on these little podcasts, even looking at basic design stuff. I didn't realise you could do that, or because there's so much stuff tucked in 7671, but beyond that, in other legislation and other standards, it's mind blowing, really, when you think of it. But
yeah, I think the industry of things realising they can join in these debates on social media is a powerful change we've seen in the last year. And Craig's dead right. There's a lot of people who don't want to get involved in that because you don't want to be seen to be wrong. And there is a big fear to that. You can give a view on what you think and be wrong and then change your view. I think the industry being part of that on social media would be a powerful thing to challenge some of the default installation methods that people start thinking are acceptable. We saw it with outdoor consumer units a bit. We saw it with EV charge points with these RCDs in them. And then we're reacting after thousands of them have gone in, when we know all along that the industry of things had a view on it, but didn't really publicly say anything. So I think that's something that could maybe change going forward. But that's just me speaking personally again. And it's good that you do this, Richard. You're one of the people who do kind of lead on that. And Darren Cranis as well does a great job of getting out there and chatting on podcasts and doing his stuff. I heard him on Fixed Radio not long ago. There's Steve Humphreys as well, who's doing that with Napit. They're going off and having chats, and they're not afraid of sharing the views. The NIC have got The Wire, which is a great thing that they do. Craig mentioned the question of the week, which leads us quite nicely onto that. We can maybe have a little discussion and give our views on that, Craig.
Yeah, I can't remember it verbatim, but basically one of my PMs texted me it last night, and I thought, oh, fair play, it's an interesting conversation because I hadn't seen it come up yet. And it was along the lines of, obviously we know if AFDDs shall be installed in houses of multiple occupations. So if you're undertaking an EICR now, what would you code it? And they had C1, C2, C3, or FI. So that's the question, gents. You go and you inspect a HMO now. There is no AFDDs installed on the socket circuits. We understand they should be a shall. What do you code?
I mean, we know that if you want it to actually change, then you need to be coding it C2 because everyone just ignores their C3s. I think there was a kind of an over-application of RCDs to begin with where some people are coding them C2 when they were just buried in there's still a discussion there around that. I think the code breakers give that as a C2. I don't know what the ESF view on that is through the guidance documents. I've not recently read that, but I was still on the chain of thought that it's C3 unless you can argue that it is potentially dangerous. And I think the AFDD side of it is a little bit different because it is a HMO, because we have had these issues of fires in high-rise buildings as well and such, and there's an argument that we should see to it on safety grounds due to that. But that's an engineering view rather than something that maybe falls in line with what the industry of things might be telling us.
So before Richard gives us the textbook answer, because he writes these guides.
Yeah, you should know.
My opinion is on the RCD conversation, because ironically that's where our conversation went last night after this, of is this another round of the RCD situation, and my stance was an RCD not being on a socket, I would see to if there was a risk that what was connected could go outside. So I always used to have a sort of a rule, well, if you could plug a lawnmower in and take it outside from inside the house and that wasn't RCD protected, then I would be more inclined to C2. But if it's in the middle of a office block and a floor box where the computers are plugged in and nobody's ever really touching them, then a C3 is probably a safe and valuable contribution, was my sort of, again, engineering judgment. Obviously, every situation's different, but just as a rough blanket kind of production. But now, I don't know if my view on that would slightly change because RCDs came in 17th edition Amendment 3, so circa 2008 time.
Oh, then, yeah.
I mean, we're 14 years-ish approximately on from there. There shouldn't really still be installations where that's an issue, in my opinion, but we know there will be. But with AFDDs, it's hard, isn't it? Because technically, installations we are looking at now, the AFDDs changed in 2022 to being a shall, I think. Technically, we've not hit 5 years since that happened yet. So the properties you are inspecting are potentially retrospective of this version of the regulations. And at which point is it fair to apply new regulations to installations potentially installed before that point? And that's my grey area, because at that point I go, well, C3, if it was made in 2016, probably a C2 if it was built 6 months ago. Because it should have been applied at the point of that installation.
Yeah, that's fair, I think. If it should have been done at the time because it was mandated in the regs, then yeah, the code would change, wouldn't it, I guess?
Don't know.
If I went to an installation that was 6 months old and they weren't installed as per the full requirements within 421, blah, 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 the regs, then I'd be contacting the certification body to find out how that ever got verification, because it
designed in 2015, mate. We're all good.
Do you know what I mean?
The amount of jobs I've got is still out 2015.
Yeah. But if it's an older installation than that, it's got to be a C3, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Because adding them would certainly enhance the safety of the installation, but potentially dangerous for what reason? For what? What's the evidence of them not being there, being a potential danger? Let's say there was a number of fires let's say it was a care home and there was evidence that there'd been a number of fires because they didn't have a risk assessment policy, the management for people bringing their own pieces of portable equipment or equipment in, or something like that. Or, I don't know, there was the wiring was beyond a certain age, or I don't know, there was something extra that made you go from a 3 to a potentially dangerous because of this or this, not just because a guidance book says it's got to be a C2. Well, why is it? It's your judgment, isn't it? It's your engineering judgment. You can go beyond the guidance, which our guidance specifically says C3, but you could go beyond that if there were certain levels of risk. But what's the likelihood leading to the risk? What is the risk first, and how likely is it that could happen? If it's all installed in the bloody care home, then what's the drama?
Can I play a bit of controversy on that?
Yeah.
How can we actually prove that it is any more safe having an AFDD? Because I don't know how to test them.
You can't test them.
That's the whole other can of worms, isn't it? I think it's like, I mean, you're right. We can look at the RCD thing, and you could have an old 3036 board that's in a 7-story flat, and if we're going to see 3 cables in the fabric of the building because we don't see that as potentially dangerous, it'll stay there and never be changed. And technically speaking, I wouldn't fall out with an inspector who coded it in that way.
No.
But there comes a point where if we've decided that these things are so much safer and are going to improve that and stop people having electric shocks and fires and whatnot, if we don't change the way we code due to that, that brings a bigger question, I think. The value that's held in a C3 code. We're issuing these things, we're saying it's a recommended improvement, and yet 90% of the time it's ignored. Should that be acceptable?
Well, let's say that you C3'd this installation for not having AFDDs, yeah? And it goes on the report, but it's otherwise satisfactory. So you've made a note and you've made the landlord or the duty holder aware that you would strongly recommend replacing on those specific circuits AFDDs at £100 each plus labour, etc. They then have got a duty, because you are the skilled person that they've employed, for you to do a technical detailed inspection and provide them with some guidance. Let's say that 6 months down the line there was a fire which resulted in a fatality within that building, and the fire officer, the fire brigade, whoever it is, does an investigation, finds out it was from a piece of equipment due to arcing set on fire and it killed someone. The inspector then wouldn't be a drama, because he's actually recommended that you install them. It's up to the duty holder, and they would have a real difficult time in a court of law when you've recommended that it would greatly enhance the safety of the installation. They can't say, well, I ain't going to do it because they're £100 each, because someone's been fatally killed or injured. So I totally agree that C3s, what do they actually mean? Who takes much notice of them? But if push comes to shove and they're asked by a judge, hold on a minute, you've employed this person with these qualifications, experience, knowledge, and all the rest of it, that's done this inspection for and has recommended this, and this, and you haven't done it, they've got to explain why they haven't done it. But I completely understand what you're saying. C3 is, generally worthless, but if something was to happen, they'd be in a real difficult position, wouldn't they?
So I've got a couple of opinions on that and one potential follow-up question, which we might have to come back to. Should we, this isn't the question, but this is my view, when an installation is over a set amount of years old, because of how quick everything is moving in this day and age, should we say anything older than 10 years should retrospectively be brought up to the current standard of the regs? I think personally, it doesn't have to be 10 years, but there should be a mark in the book that says, if past this point, when inspected, it does now become a C2, it is potentially dangerous, because technology, when 3036 fuses were being installed, is not the same technology as we're putting in now. So can you argue that it's not actually fit for purpose because the use of the installation is no longer what it was maybe originally designed for way back when? Because even something as simple as a cooker, well, now we've got leakages, we've got harmonics, you've got DC in there, you've got all sorts of standby elements, you've got timers, you've got controls. Even a cooker supply is not going to be the same as what the cooker maybe was 20 years ago. So does that give a rash justification to say, well, actually, after a set amount of time, because God knows what we'll be installing in 10 years' time, to be perfectly honest, like, it's probably going to be a spaceship. So is that protection still adequate 20 years down the line when the world has completely changed in the last 20 years? That's my sort of an answer to Mark's question. I think there should be a time scale where a C3 isn't a C3 anymore, and actually installations should just be upgraded to protect us for what we are doing personally.
I think you're right that would help. What that period is, I don't know. I had these I'm going to mention John Lorimer from FCS. Actually, we had these conversations on LinkedIn a few years ago, and he was at the same thing, that we're going out to these installs repeatedly, coding stuff C3 every 5 years or every 10 years, whatever it is, and it's still there. You know, we're starting to see this, and that's the duty holders' maybe lack of understanding of what that means, or the fact that they're still getting that satisfactory report. We need to remember that that's what's stated on there, even with those C3 codes. Maybe we need to look at the terminology around the way these reports are delivered. And I can understand why electricians end up in that spot, knowing that if I code in a certain way, that's never going to get done, and it really should be done. So you start looking at the way you're delivering your reports and changing your codes maybe to kind of get some action. And that then puts you in a situation with commercial law, and are you overstating safety to try and get stuff done? And we shouldn't have to be doing that. I think there needs to be more emphasis on what these codes mean and how they're put forward to consumers and duty holders and their responsibilities in and around all of that. How that gets done, I don't know. In terms of the time frame, I reckon 20 years is maybe a good one to put in there. We've got the ACR CDs thing as well, haven't we, where we had those going in for a while, and now we've got a bit more DC leakage that's in all the stuff we're using, and maybe they're not going to work as well as they should. And is it wise to encourage people to have those changed? And again, coming back to the EV and outdoor consumer unit argument, the rollout of EV charge points and solar PV systems is a great opportunity for industry to make a huge improvement to people's homes in terms of the normal switchgear, if we're going to have replacement consumer units to satisfy them rather than a box on the wall outside. Same with smoke alarms, with the battery storage as well. We can get a huge upgrade in all that, which is a safety improvement as a byproduct of normal things we're going to be doing anyway. Yeah. So I think there's an element of discussion around that too.
But then my question element to come out of all of that was, we mentioned about AFDDs and we mentioned about costs. Now, underneath our delightful reg of shall, it says it is recommended to install on all other socket circuits. So should we? Because I've just had a job where this is a high-rise building, so there's no way around this, but it was costing our client £25,000 to put the AFDDs in, because they were of a manufacturer who was nearly £300 an AFDD to buy without any install.
Cost isn't inconsequential, is it? It's quite a number when you get to that scale.
Yeah, and I think if you had to justify not doing that, the cost is substantial, isn't it? So you'd be, sure it's
more than a life.
Well, yeah, that's the only problem you've got.
And that's the hard bit, isn't it?
It's very difficult, yeah. And unfortunately, it'll only be when something really goes wrong where we end up in a situation where, a case goes through, and then that'll be the case that they always go back to, and they'll say, well, in this case, that's what, you'll have an expert witness in and all the rest of it. But
so in every house now, every time we change a socket circuit, should they now have an AFDD on them? Because it says recommend, but recommend means should. But I know there's lots of things around that as to what that means. But
that's the terminology, isn't it? If you actually translate that and use the definitions, that's what it means. And we have the same conversations in solar around optimizers. We proposed a 30 kilowatt system last week, and if we're using optimizers, the client had budget for only half the size of the array, so they're halving what they can achieve to have what you might term increased safety. And you'll have those same conversations with AFDDs. It was like, okay, we can put them in, but what we're going to take out somewhere else because I've only got this amount of money. Maybe they're going to ditch some of the lighting scheme to the bare minimum of the lux levels. And is one safer than the other? I don't know.
Well, you've got your AFDDs, but you can't see how to get out. So, you know, it's
that's what happens though, isn't it? That's the world of contracts, that you can see quantity surveyors doing that. Okay, we'll go for the AFDDs, but we won't put as much outside lighting as we need. We'll take some out of the communal corridors just to cover it to a bare minimum. We'll drop the number of sockets or whatever. There'll be changes that happen to meet the budget. That's what goes on.
But hopefully, as that technology gets more proven and the cost will start to come down, then maybe more of them, the should will be a shall, if that kind of makes sense. The shoulds will be, we'll certainly put them in on your ring final circuits or whatever. So any equipment is also protected in theory. But at the moment, top dollar, we're all a bit skeptical of whether they do work or don't work.
Because I was going to say, I asked that question on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, I think, and somebody posted on the thread, I've forgotten the name, an article they'd written about how with ring circuits, the AFDD won't actually see the difference because of the fact it will just be coming down the other cables anyway. So do they work on ring circuits? I don't know. I need to do more digging into that, but it was an interesting thought process. I was like, well, lots of sockets potentially maybe going in on rings, but if they're not going to be working, then where's the benefit to this?
But again, that
piece of study
that gets a bit technical in terms of compliance with that standard. There's two ways of compliance with the standard, isn't there? And there was a famous chap from Leicester that tested quite a few of these devices last year, and one brand in particular uses a particular method of that technology with within that device detecting a fault, whereas the others use a different way of doing it, and you can use either within the product standard. But again, it goes beyond the Sparky's knowledge as such. It's a product standard, and you're having to delve into the science boffins. All we want to do is pick the device up, check it's got the correct BSEN numbers on it and all the rest of it. It's a reputable brand, and you install it and you fit and forget. Hopefully that's what you try and do. But do they actually work? I don't know. And I know from the work within the JPEL subcommittees that at international level and HD level, there is more coming down the line in the coming editions of regs, because they are used in more circumstances internationally than what we do at the moment. We're just spoon feeding it in, and trust me, they'll be everywhere eventually, maybe 5-10 years, whatever. And you know what? It's like a car where we ended up with one airbag to start with, and it was on the steering wheel, and then you ended up with one on the passenger bit, then you had maybe some in the chairs, and now they're all round in curtains. It's a progression, and if it makes something safer, brilliant, because obviously it's been proven and the technology's improved. And and going back earlier to how long do you think before you kind of say that the installation needs updating? Well, if we applied that to cars and boilers and other things, then I don't know, like my 22-year-old car this year then will be, I've got to get rid of it and I've got to upgrade to another one. Well, I've got the upgraded version as well, but that's not the point. My 22-year-old car, gone. I can't use that then if I use Craig's mythology. But understand what you're saying. It's like a boiler, isn't it? If it's 10 years old, does it mean it's got to come off the wall? The gas engineer would say, oh yeah, because it's a $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 in his back pocket. But is it still serviceable and safe when it's 10 years old or 20 years old?
I would say potentially not. And the reason for the comment is, you ask most manufacturers how long their switchgear they'll guarantee or warranty or whatever it for, they will say that switchgear has a shelf life of approximately 20 years.
Yeah.
So if the manufacturer is telling you that after 20 years, they don't think it's really going to work as it should, should that be the point in which we go, actually time to rip out?
Yeah, potentially.
No, it's just an opinion. We're talking, just thinking. Like,
no, I think that
makes sense. People say the manufacturer's only saying that. Just like we've had, your iPhone battery all of a sudden when it's 2 years old, Apple is sending a message and you've got to go and buy another phone because your battery's no good, and Apple are doing that to you. I don't know. A lot of people.
I was talking about that today because my phone started doing that. I think that's something genuinely do. I think with the cars example, you kind of got the standard of the MOT, haven't you? That most cars
that's right.
kind of attain. I think we've got kind of that with the electrical industry. I don't fall out with some sort of cut off. Where that is, I don't know, because I totally see the argument that you can have an old installation, and in certain circumstances, if you've maintained it correctly and the conditions of its use justify it, you could keep it going. Those 3036 fuses work great. If you've not got a risk from RCD requirements and such, is it more safe? Is it potentially dangerous? I mean, those kind of discussions can rage on. But if we want to see those improvements, then we do need to consider that. We saw a bit of it with PRS for the private rental sector, where there was some big investment improvement in people's properties just from having EICRs done. We've been on that journey, and that's great. It's a tricky one because ultimately this is money out of consumers' pockets, and got the cost of living. There's all those wider discussions as well. So it's challenging. It's an interesting point, and fair on the NIC for chucking that out there, because I think that's a great one for contractors to bat around, because it does delve into other parts to do with RCDs of the past. And we've got the challenges of solar going forward. My view is that we need to press some of these white good manufacturers to make better stuff. We're seeing you can get arc fault detection built into your solar PV inverters, comes built into some EV chargers. Why don't we get that in washing machines and in tumble dryers and in fridge freezers, where they have the technology in the actual equipment that sets itself on fire?
Yeah, why not? Even better. Why not?
Because it is mainly aimed at appliances at the end of the day, isn't it? Rather than the fixed wiring of an installation. So how much is it in product standard versus how much should it be in the regs?
It's an easy win for manufacturers, isn't it? They've just passed that off. That's the electricians' problem. We'll just keep making this stuff and selling it. But that's another conspiracy theory.
We have to make sure we don't lose the skill of engineering judgment to installation, isn't it? And that's why people go, why can't the regs just tell me what to do? Yes, no, here, there. It can't ever be that way. You've got to put that time into learning and bringing all this back to apprentices, which is what we try and aim towards, is you need to spend your hard yards, unfortunately, learning that and having an opinion and making a judgment and challenging your bosses as to why they've made a judgment, because you've got to understand. Otherwise, you can be a spark, but monkey see, monkey do, and no disrespect to anybody, is not necessarily applying that judgment, is it? It's just doing what you were shown.
Yeah. I think it's that confidence thing, isn't it, for any trainees out there, that if you're doing something or you see something and you've got queries about it, your views, have those discussions. Me and Matthew had one actually, a ring final circuit that had been derated by a prior electrician to 20 amps because there was broken continuity on the neutral conductor. And he was like, well, as it is in its current state, is it dangerous? And I'm like, but there's a known fault on that circuit. It's been adjusted and it's set up with the overcurrent protected device, but there is a break in a cable somewhere. How are you going to report on that? Just as a challenge to him. And he ended up coming back with the same point of view as I had. But it's having those discussions, I think, just to check yourself sometimes and not being afraid of people disagreeing with you. I think it's healthy to have different views on stuff.
But ultimately, his thought process was spot on straight away. Is it safe? That's the point, isn't it? That's the point of a periodic inspection test. You're there to see if that installation is still safe for someone to use. As you quite rightly referred back to an MOT earlier, but with that, they have defined, areas that they've got to inspect and defined measurements, for instance, I don't know, for your thickness of your brake pads and your thickness of your brake discs and your tyres, that, they're lucky in a roundabout way because they have defined areas that they must inspect, and you must it either passes or it fails, or potentially it's not a fail, but it's an advisory, if that kind of makes sense. A bit like our C3, you don't have to have it done, but you may need to have it done in the future as such.
But the difference with their C3 is their advisory usually means by the time you get around to MOT next year, if you haven't done it, you are going to fail because you haven't done it.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting on that point of Mark, and I'll probably make a comment, and we'll not do this tonight, I don't think, but Sparks know to derate a ring to 20 amps if there's a problem in the ring. How many tell you why it's 20 amps?
Yeah, this is true. And do you know all of the reference methods for the cable's entire run when you're making that decision to derate the breaker? Is 20 amps enough?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll leave it on my opinion, which could be wrong. People can tell me. But my opinion of why it's 20 amps is because of the fact of the leg of the cable, that neither leg should be taking more than 20 amps at any time.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the default opinion that a 2.5 mil twin and earth cable is good to 27, 26 amps when it's clipped direct. But what about if it's going through lots of insulation that you don't know about somewhere in the building? It's a big call to make when you're out inspecting, and that's why we had that discussion, because he's like, I don't know. That it was a big property. It's like, I can't be certain of the installation method along its entire run. No. So we need to factor the worst case scenario, maybe. But then maybe that assumption's wrong. And it was an interesting chat. And like you say, Craig, I think one for another day, that one, because we've had a good old stab at this podcast so far. Is there anything else either of you two would like to add before we end it?
Yeah.
Go on, Richard.
Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, a great start to 2025. Some good conversations, good catch up, and lots to explore. Hopefully, with some more frequent ones in the future. Yeah, it's been good. Yeah, great as always.
Anything you want to add, Craig?
No, all good. Thanks for your time, gents. It's been interesting. I will go away with more questions than I turned up with, which is how these always go, and we'll maybe challenge some of them next time.
Yeah, we've got some good technical topics to come back with there after this chat, and we have got a guest booked on with us from Solax, who are coming to talk about training. So it's the delivery training person from the manufacturer. They're going to come and have a chat about how they work in providing stuff to trainees and also electricians. Bit of a different one for us. So that will hopefully be recorded next week and should be out for you shortly. Otherwise, thank you both for coming on to have a chat with me tonight. I've really enjoyed that. It was a really good conversation across a lot of topic areas, and it's late at night. It's nearly 9:15 that we're all sat here doing this, and massive respect to Craig and Richard for setting that time aside to come and chat with us. And we'll see you on the next one.
Cheers all.
Bye, guys.
Find the stop button.